So not only have they conceded that wind, solar, and batteries are the most expensive, they also acknowledge, yeah, we can't do it because if you remember what the Ascend Analytics report said, it barely meets reliability metrics. And
That's
I
right.
would argue that it doesn't meet reliability metrics at all. So what are they going to do? They're going to do hydrogen. And it's hydrogen made with wind, solar, and batteries. So you're taking the most expensive way to decarbonize, and then you're going to make clean hydrogen out of it. So you make the single most expensive way to decarbonize even more expensive because your backup is something that doesn't really exist yet.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of PowerGab, your go-to show for all things energy and environmental policy in the state of Colorado. I'm Jake Fogleman, joined as always by my co-host Amy Cooke. In this week's show, we want to unveil and formally announce the publication of a new research paper that we're proud to publish here at the Independence Institute in our Energy and Environmental Policy Center. It was authored by two folks that we've had multiple repeat guests on this program here, the Energy Bad Boys, Isaac Orr and Mitch Rolling, who also work for Always On Energy Research, a great energy modeling and analytics firm. So we actually got in contact with Isaac and Mitch several months back because of a topic we've talked about on this show before, and that was the Ascend Analytics report that the Colorado Energy Office commissioned. So a separate report that the government actually put out. And we tore that thing to shreds, on this show, you and I, Amy, because, well, for one, we actually were pleased to see that it admitted that wind, solar, and batteries only is the most expensive way to decarbonize the state. We were happy to see them admit that. However, they also on the other hand, prioritized a particular scenario that they said is the most cost-effective way to meet 100% decarbonization by 2040. And so obviously we were skeptical. We reached out to folks that do this type of modeling work to say, is that actually true? Will you dig into this and let us know if that's actually true? And now that, ended up forming this report that came out. And it turns out it's not quite the rosy picture that Ascend Analytics and the Energy Office was originally touting.
Yeah, Jake, that's a kind way of putting it. One is that we did tear it to shreds because it deserved it. Here's the thing, and this is what the Energy Office does, this is what the Polis administration does, and this is what we find so much of those who desperately want wind and solar and batteries to be the way we power our grid, and they want it to be the cheapest. I mean, they really truly want this to be true. Like they need it to be true for their own sort of I would say self-identity. And so what they do is they ignore most of the costs. And they look at everything through one single lens and its point of generation. So they're quote, decarbonizing through a single point, but and the metric is through a single point of generation. So they don't look at the entire, upstream, downstream costs or environmental costs of anything. It is this one single point. So that's what Colorado's energy plan is based on, this one tiny metric. And then they so desperately want it to be true that they've put all of the backup that any backup, because they've also conceded, by the way, that wind, solar, and batteries can't do it alone. So not only have they conceded that wind, solar, and batteries are the most expensive, they also acknowledge, yeah, we can't do it because if you remember what the Ascend Analytics report said, it barely meets reliability metrics. And
That's
I
right.
would argue that it doesn't meet reliability metrics at all. So what are they going to do? They're going to do hydrogen. And it's hydrogen made with wind, solar, and batteries. So you're taking the most expensive way to decarbonize, and then you're going to make quote, clean hydrogen out of it. And so you make the single most expensive way to decarbonize even more expensive because your backup is something that doesn't really exist yet, certainly doesn't exist commercially, and doesn't, I mean, in private, utilities will tell you that they don't have a lot of faith in it. And in fact, I know utilities that have quietly pulled their projects, even though they're subsidized, because put a dollar's worth of input getting you 60 cents back on the dollar is just not a great investment, even with subsidies. Still not a great investment. So what did Mitch and Isaac find when they modeled it? So they modeled what is it called? The optimum, I'm trying to think, it's the optimum
Optimized 100, yeah.
Optimized 100. So it's OT. We called it OT 100. And by the way, you can find this on the Independence Institute webpage. So here's what they found. I'll just give you a couple of numbers. The true cost of the OT 100 scenario, because remember, they don't model all the costs. They're just modeling generation, is an additional 114 billion through 2040 compared to operating the current grid. So in other words, we let the grid as it is, it's 114 billion. Anyway, so 114 billion, and why? So then you ask, why are those costs higher? Well, it's because AOER takes into consideration silly little things like transmission and distribution. So in other words, they actually take into consideration getting that power to your house.
Right.
Because generally that's where you want it. So it isn't enough just to produce it. You actually have to get it somewhere. And Ascend Analytics, the fact that the Colorado Energy Office commissioned a study and spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on it that didn't include the total system cost is such a misuse of tax. That's a worthless study. That is totally useless. So I don't know why they even did it other than to try and show that they can decarbonize at the point of generation, but we're not going to deliver it anywhere.
Yeah.
I mean, and the worst part, and I'll let you unveil these numbers, because the costs go higher. By the way, that's just through 2040. Yeah. You go through another 2050, it's another $215 billion. But what's $215 billion among our 6 million Coloradans? It's, nothing. So, again, prepare for your $1,000 electric bills in the future. But I think even with all of that, so now you've spent all that money and you're paying for it. I'll let you give away the blackout modeling, because that to me is just, and they don't do that, by the way. They don't model that.
Right.
No, but they will not. No one in Colorado is modeling the actual energy plans that they want to impose upon Coloradans. They're not modeling the full cost, and they're not modeling the reliability of it. Just wrap your mind around that. We are literally transforming how we power our state. And this executive branch doesn't think enough of Coloradans to actually tell them if it's going to work or not. So I'll let you talk about what those numbers are, because they're staggering.
Yeah. The reliability piece, like you said, is a staggering finding. And it's part of the reason why we work with Mitch and Isaac so much on this sort of stuff, because they've really pioneered this type of modeling of using historical weather data and capacity factors. What we've talked about before is how much you're actually getting a particular energy facility to generate based on its nameplate capacity. And they actually model that kind of stuff. We've done reports with them in the past where they've shown blackouts under various scenarios. They did the same thing here with this new, speculative green hydrogen built out generation and also 12-hour batteries that don't currently exist anywhere on Colorado's grid. So there's a lot of speculative stuff that's clearly meant to sort of fudge the reliability factor, right? Because you can claim, well, green hydrogen, that's a dispatchable resource. It's a thermal resource. 12-hour batteries, those are longer duration storage than typical batteries. That should shore up reliability, right? Well, according to Mitch and Isaac's modeling, to do this, they use actual historical weather data that Colorado has seen. So it's not like they're making up conditions on the ground here in Colorado. They trace what those weather conditions would mean for a grid that's largely dominated by wind and solar that's relied on to produce that green hydrogen that supposedly is going to save the day. And they found that from 2045 to 2049, that there could be blackouts for as long as 66 hours, causing up to about 60% of the state to have power outages at its peak. Once again, this is a result of basically wind and solar droughts that are sufficient enough to not allow green hydrogen to be produced, and then you exhaust the supply of your existing green hydrogen. They found that in a hypothetical 9-day period in 2047, that Colorado would experience 136 hours of blackouts. So 136 hours, no power. And they actually calculated that in economic terms as well, as what that would mean for the state is that would be about a $5.2 billion hit in terms of economic activity that would result from not having any power for 136 hours. Just so staggering in terms of costs on economic terms, but also, as we've talked about so often in this show, what blackouts mean would be staggering in terms of potential loss of life, health effects, and you name it.
Yeah, the loss of life on 136 hours. Let's just do it in half. Let's just take half of it. So what is that? 60 something hours, 65. Let's call it 65, 66 hours, maybe a little. Imagine if you didn't have power for that long in Colorado during a cold spell.
Yeah, early January or something. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, people die. People died in Texas with that. Here's the difference too with what Mitch and Isaac do. So when you see this reliability modeling, a lot of times somebody will they'll say this is a representative year. And they'll take, we used 2021 weather data, or we used, 2019 weather data. And you have to look to see the year that they cherry pick. And there's usually a reason for it. What Mitch and Isaac do is they actually take a long stretch of historical weather data. And then that's what goes into the model. So it's not 1 year. They didn't pick the coldest year on record. They didn't pick the warmest year. They actually take a representative sampling of historical weather data. So yeah, 136 hours, if you were, like I said, take half and you can, figure out if they're off by a factor of 50%, $5.2 billion in lost economic activity, and massive, it would be catastrophic loss of life. It just would be. And the CDPHE gives away batteries to Medicaid patients who are on life-sustaining equipment because they know. So we've talked about this multiple times. All the red flags are there. But here's the thing on that. Those batteries will only last, I don't know, let's say they last 24 hours. What do you do after that? If you have no power, plug it into your car charger. Make sure you have enough gas in your car. And you can also just don't keep your garage door closed, but turn it on and get some heat, I guess. It is the fact of the matter is this is the direction that the Polis administration and the Colorado Energy, with support from the Colorado Energy Office and frankly the Colorado legislature, this is the direction that the state is taking, and we have to change that course. It is we just have to. I mean, nobody can do this.
To your point, Amy, what's even more sobering about these potential numbers and these projections is that Mitch and Isaac relied on the energy demand projections that Ascend Analytics did in their study, just to kind of do a one-for-one comparison. And Ascend Analytics projections were, shall we say, conservative. They didn't account for data centers. Basically, all the things that we've been talking about over the last, this came out a couple years ago, so you can maybe give them some grace there. But think about all the conversation we've had in the last year or two about just explosive potential demand projections that are coming from new sources of demand on top of the demand that's already being created by electrification mandates and the like. So potentially these 136 blackout hours might even be a conservative estimate under these grid conditions, assuming that Colorado follows through with the so-called optimized 100 energy scenario. So I just think that's worth pointing out that this is probably a conservative estimate, considering that we may be seeing a lot more strain on the grid than we maybe anticipated just a couple of years ago.
And yeah, you're absolutely right. And of course, those data centers, even if the data centers don't materialize, let's just say they don't. I don't know if you've ever noticed how much when you're using AI, or like I'll use ChatGPT, I'll use Grok. I actually use a couple of different ones. The amount of power it sucks out of your computer. I mean, so just people, it isn't just the data centers themselves. It is people using using that AI platform that that causes a lot of just a lot of energy use, high energy use.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a bunch of other findings in this report. We're of course going to drop it in the show notes, and you can find it on our website. There's plenty more that I would love to discuss on here, but I want to talk about some of the political angles of this report really quickly, why we felt it important to do this. And it's something we've talked about on the show before, is that this Ascend Analytics report might have been interesting if it was just released into the ether and that was the end of it, right? It's fine to just see an estimate on what the government might think something might cost. But we actually know now that the Polis administration is going to use these findings in part to push for something that it failed to get last legislative session, but we know for a fact they're going to try this upcoming legislative session. And that is to move up the state's carbon deadlines from, current state statute says we must be decarbonized by 2050. Polis, since he entered the statewide political scene, has said he wants it to be 100% by 2040. And now he's putting his efforts behind a bill to make that a reality, right? And so you have to, if some study is going to be the basis of such a drastic policy shift, I think it behooves all of us to be crystal clear about what that actually means for Coloradans and not rely on potentially fudge numbers or misleading numbers or numbers that omit serious drivers of costs and reliability risks. So I just think it's important that we emphasize why that this study is so relevant. And even though it's a 2-year-old study, this is very much an active conversation in Colorado politics.
Yeah, that's 100% true. And I will say this too. We also provide the numbers that if Colorado wants to get, 90% carbon emissions reduction, think about that, 90% with zero blackouts, they can do that for way less.
Yep.
Involving nuclear and natural gas. And that brings us to just another point that we need to bring up. And it's to your point, Jake, it's really the political conversation now that surrounds it. So we've shown repeatedly, and this is just the latest, that what they are betting on is a fantasy, and what we're showing you is reality. But you can get to 90% carbon reduction. Imagine that, 90% with zero blackouts. So you have the most reliable system, but it includes nuclear. And what did that involve? We talked about that ad nauseum last year. We had to get nuclear included in state statute. Well, the Polis administration and the Colorado Energy Office are, even though it's in statute, are not interested in it. At least their actions have shown that they're not. And at the same time, too, and we talked about this with Pueblo. Pueblo is the quote just transition for them is really an unjust transition. It is not materialized the way they were promised. So what I love is what Colorado, it's Action Colorado 22, whatever. Action 22, they've got but Action Colorado. And Sarah Blackhurst and Dave Shipley, who really ran things, they actually did something super impressive that I thought, and that is they invited everyone to the table and said, this isn't going to work. Not only is it not going to work for Pueblo, which is really where their focus. I mean, their focus was on Pueblo, but they're like, it's not going to work for anyone. And so we need every voice on this to come up with some kind of working document, a guideline for lawmakers and others, and say, this is really what we need. And they had a couple of meetings and it just whittled down and whittled down. And then there were about, I don't know, maybe a dozen of us that actually sat down. I mean, we sat down, listen, it was all done remotely. So it's not like we were in a room, but people who didn't know each other before. And there came up with pillars, important pillars of what energy policy in Colorado needs to be going forward. And we came from all parts of the state, all political backgrounds, different industries. I come from think tank world, which Sarah's kind of funny. She's like, yeah, I was told you were going to be the problem child. And she's not wrong. She's not wrong, right? I mean, I come from the think tank world. We love to stick to our principles. It's fantastic. We get to do that. We have a North Star and we stick to it. Others told me that's like, oh my God, that's going to be an exercise in futility. You guys aren't going to come up with anything. And what we did is we actually came up with this document. And I would encourage everybody right now, you can go to, I think it's actioncolorado.org. And then you can find their Facebook page and you can find what the pillars are that we talked about. It was affordability and economic competitiveness, labor, community, and just transition, energy system reliability and feasibility, legal and regulatory integrity, transparency, and accountability. And we didn't all work on every one of those pillars, but and some of us worked on, I worked on a couple of them. I won't tell you which ones. And I'm also, by the way, not everybody wants their name to be known. And I can totally understand that because they may be in a sensitive situation. So I'm not going to out my fellow contributors on this. But I will say this, what you'll find when you see that document is that this group from all these diverse backgrounds had the same goal, and that is that Colorado's energy policy needs to be better, and it needs to prioritize reliability and cost, and then communities and families. And we all, that was the guiding sort of the North Star that we all pointed to. And then we all brought our own piece to the table. You'll see a lot of, and I admit I talked a lot about reliability, the importance of reliability. What you won't find in there are mandates for any resource. You're also not going to see support necessarily for intermittent or ineffective resources. We do talk about a diverse portfolio, like resources should be diverse, but they should be reliable and they should be cost effective. We also acknowledge that if we expect a utility to build large baseload nuclear, that they're going to need help financing it, like how the way it has to, there's going to have to be some structural changes to how it's financed. And this is not something I would ever really, I mean, I don't love construction work in progress financing. I don't, but The Locke Foundation in North Carolina proved that you can have some really good ratepayer safeguards in there that, for instance, if a utility abandons a project, that they don't recover the cost. I mean, there are things you can do to protect ratepayers, but also create an environment where the utility can invest and investors look at it and go, oh, this is not a risky investment. So they get better financing terms. So there are things that we can do to lower cost for ratepayers, improve reliability, and protect Colorado's diverse communities and lower emissions. But it's just not this 100% by 2040, which is really a political deadline. It's not a deadline rooted in science or in physics or in economics. That's the other thing we put in there. No arbitrary deadlines. Because innovation comes at the speed of innovation. Sometimes it's really fast, sometimes it takes time. So this idea that we have these arbitrary deadlines are just insane. So what you'll see in there is a consensus document. Everybody did not get everything they wanted, but everybody got, one, their voice heard, and two, got part of what was important to them. And I actually am super proud of this, but more importantly, I am honored that, and I give all the credit to Sarah Blackhurst and Dave Shipley, who herded the cats. Nobody's voice ever was raised. Nobody ever got mad. We didn't, like I said, we didn't always get what we wanted, but we all had our voice heard and we all got something. And so that's what this document reflects. And I'm not certain anyone else could have done it other than Sarah and Dave, and I give them all the credit in the world. And I really do hope that lawmakers and the Polis administration look at this and see this was about Colorado. This was not about anybody's ego. It was, in fact, check your ego and your little pet ambitions at the door. Because this was about finding a way forward on energy policy that everyone could get on board with. We were at the labor unions were at the table. Everyone who wanted to be there, everyone was invited, and if you wanted to be part of it, you could be there. It was really an impressive thing. So I was thrilled to be a tiny part of it and just learn from Sarah and Dave, and I think we came up with a great document.
And not only that, but it's emblematic of the fact that these discussions are having amongst a broader subsection of the state of Colorado. It's not just us pumping out these reports and being cranky on PowerGab every week. Everyone else is starting to, everyone's taking notice of this, except for the folks at the Gold Dome. And so it's just building momentum of people saying enough is enough. We need to find a better way forward. Hopefully, like you said, hopefully folks start to take heed that this is a statewide thing where folks are really taking seriously the potential threats to, one, affordability, and two, reliability of our energy policy.
And I would add this. I think that the Polis administration and the legislature really has only paid attention to one subset, which is the environmental left. And they do not speak for everybody. In fact, I dare say they speak for a small minority of Coloradans. I think most Coloradans would take 90% emissions reductions, and 100% reliability. I think they take that any day of the week over 100% wind, solar, and batteries. And maybe the lights go on, maybe they don't.
Yeah, I think that's right. And we, in fact, have past polling data. We've commissioned polls that found where the pecking order lies between emissions goals and reliability. And people are not willing to sacrifice reliability. Yeah. As we're coming up on time here, Amy, do you have any takeaways for our listeners on either the study or the compact or just the broader state of Colorado energy policy?
Yeah. So once again, we've proven that Colorado's on the wrong track, but there's a solution. Like, there's a way to go forward with this. That's number one. Number two is I have more optimism than ever because of this compact. I just feel like people have, to your point, they've taken notice and they're concerned. And so they're willing to roll up their sleeves and do hard work. That that's something that I haven't seen come from the state in a long time. So super proud of that. Three is you firm your own grid, but I also have a request in there. Help us firm someone's grid. I actually, we want to give away a generator. And we've talked about, I always say this, get a generator. I have multiples. I might have five. Um, but we want to help somebody else firm their grid. So I'll tell you what we're looking to do is um, get a generator from someone. Get a generator, and we will give away a generator. I probably, at the end of the year, make it a Christmas gift for someone to get a generator. We haven't really thought out exactly how we're going to do that. Admittedly, it's been chatter, but this time we decided we're just going to put it out there. So, would love a generator that we can help someone firm their own grid because we all know what's coming. Get your generator, but then help us help someone else.
Yeah, that's right. We want to do our part to help, like we always say, help people firm their grid. And if folks have any interest in helping us out with that project or in donating in any way, they can obviously reach out to us at info@powergab.org. That's where you can also suggest, feature guests you'd like to see us interview on the show, or issue other recommendations. And as always, you can head over to powergab.org to check out our entire back catalog. We produce new episodes every single week. And we're also available wherever you get your audio shows, whether that's Spotify or Apple. So be sure to check us out. But until next week, we'll see you.